Hello, everyone. It is the 9th of October, and this is Indigenous Peoples Day. And we have with us Grandmother Gail Thomas, and she has the floor, and she is going to take us through some teachings today.
Thank you, Shonda. I'm so happy to be able to celebrate this day with all of you. And I really appreciate that you're here in this curious and attentive and respectful way. And I'm trying to do the same. The first thing I did is light these herbs, release the spirit of the plant medicine to call in my ancestors who've done their work and ask them to join us in this beautiful way and celebrate the fact that we do have recognition of being here in the beginning and still being here. And wasn't about Columbus after all, it wasn't a discovery. So finally we can talk about that. This is big news because during the assimilation requirements, we were not able to speak of these things. We were not able to speak of anything or do anything. We had to do everything we could to stay alive. And that's how I was raised. It was illegal to speak our language until I was in my last year of college. And my father was very instrumental in that Religious Freedoms Act. He was district attorney and he was from the Blue Clan, which is our medicine clan. And to make his way through all that legality, he was a member of the Masonic Lodge. And I was lucky enough to be able to go into the offices um, probably close to 20 years ago before they sold the local temple. And I was able to see in the main office all of our medicine, our ways, our our pipes, our traditions were right there. And they were bringing together, the woodlands people. If we reach back, my grandmother, my father's mother, was from a village that was recently an ancestral dig that was identified as one of the original villages here on our sacred mountain, Adagul, because this is the oldest mountain on Turtle Island. And the people who were in those villages were the first people. And as you all know, I encourage people to reach back to the beginning of this wave of humans so we can all share ancestors. We're all there in some form, in some place, in some way. And they're the ones who brought in the spiritual teachings. They're the ones who brought in the original instructions. And most of the elders I know in many traditions say our hope for the earth and for the survival of this wave of humans is to reach back to those original instructions. So that's what I want to encourage and want to share as much as I've been able to figure out in my more than 6 decades of being here. It's been challenging because the information was lost or lied about. And you're all aware of that, so I don't think we need to linger on that. But I'm glad to be in a place where we can celebrate these connections and these ways with appropriate understandings, deep understandings and integrations. If you have that ancestry or you have that yearning, you have that calling, I want to encourage you to start digging into whatever you have available, whatever comes to you, to reach those ancestors, to honor them and to listen to them. Learn to listen. This is the main thing that Grandmother Raven Hale encouraged me to do. She was a wisdom keeper, and she started sharing our teachings in the 80s when we were first allowed to do our ghost dance again in the Civic Center here in Asheville, also originally known as Takiosti. So she encouraged me to share the teachings, and that's why I do this. And I encourage you, if you have those stories of ancestors, and the DNA patterns are starting to show that if your European ancestry was here in the 1700s or early 1800s, there's a 50% chance you have the mix. You have the native mix in your ancestry. And of course, that will help us against the blood quantum laws that are trying to take the land back and take the treaties back and just continue to take things away from us. So please, please do everything you can to connect with those ancestors, to dig up your roots and honor them. And I'm here to help you in any way I can. Happy to have those conversations, and want to encourage you to experience the ways and then integrate by sharing them, coming back and say, well, when we dance to balance the earth, this is what I feel. This is what I dream. This is the synchronicities that come up in my life when I do that, and talk about them. Do it and then talk about it. Don't just talk like we do so much here on Zoom. Dance and then talk to integrate, share to integrate, actual action. We're verb-based people. We came in as verb-based people. You know, the ancient languages are verb-based languages, and that's the centering. That's the center of the wheel, the center of the hub. Nouns are on the circumference. They come and go. Millennials love to make up their own words now. I'm sure you've all experienced this, but the nouns are on the outside and the verbs, our actual walk and talk, take us into the center. So I want to encourage as much action as you possibly can do together. And reaching back to those original ancestors in this wave of humans, integrating those experiences with each other when we come together like this so we can talk about them and integrate them experientially. So, to answer your questions on what's coming up on Unity in December, it is Chief Phil Lane's opportunity to share his work, his life's work, his teachings. And foremost in those teachings is the talking circle ways, the true talking circle ways, which I see being appropriated right now. You know, I see everybody passing the feather or saying those words like they're actually in a talking circle, and they're so not in a talking circle, because there's magic that appears in a talking circle. And I can attest that Phil Lane's teachings, and especially in our group that Joan Henry leads, brings out the magic. It brings these connections with the ancestors. It brings Carl Jung's synchronicity confirmation in the dreams and in life itself when synchronicities arise. His talking circle teachings are among the best, and I encourage you to share them. I'm hopeful. I know they've been trying for a number of years. We've all been trying to bring the Four Worlds Indigenous University into being and start with the talking circle teachings. And there are other teachings that they hope to offer as well. And I don't know when that's actually going to take place, hopefully soon, but I'm happy to keep you posted and encourage you to come to as much as you can in that December presentation that Chief Phil Lane leads for us. And the very first one, I don't know if it was 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was 19, so I think it was 4 years ago, I shared our talking circle. I did a video of our talking circle. um, following my traditional going to water ceremony. So the video was of the going to water ceremony, and then we integrated by coming into talking circle. Just to give you an example of how things work. And we held the talking circle about what we had experienced in the going to water ceremony. Those who were there, as well as those who just watched the video and, related to what they could relate to. So that was one thing that was shared, and there's so many offerings. We were hoping to have a room of talking circles where people can pop in and experience a real talking circle for just an hour. And of course, they won't be recorded because what's said in the room stays in the room. And that allows people to speak from their heart. This is another thing that's learned in the talking circle experience, is to actually be able to speak from the heart. And I can go into more on all these things if any of you have questions or anything you'd like to ask. You're welcome to.
Yes, Gail. I recently read an article that was passed to me from you, and it was on the moon goddesses, the grandmothers of the Eastern Woodland. And I would like you to talk about that if you would.
Oh, thank you. I love that. I love that we can have those articles and we can share those articles, and we can go back to recognizing that the Woodlands people are the true red race. DNA is trying to leave us out. If you notice, your DNA results are only East Asian native, which is the yellow race that came supposedly across on the Bering Sea Strait. I don't know. I mean, I don't really buy into the fact that, we all landed in one place and started walking around on the flat earth. I see it more with our traditional legends that we came from the stars, and coming from the stars, we came where we needed to come. And there's much in the DNA that is shared with the Neanderthal people that they thought were originally just in Europe, but that's not true at all. The people on the Kuala boundary, the eastern band of Cherokee people now are tying into that Neanderthal genealogy. And we are the Woodlands people. The yellow race is the plains people, not to create othering and separation, but to take you back, okay? The plains people came from the Anasazi. The Anasazi people are the Hopi people and Navajo people and the plains, Chaco, Kenya, and all those places. They were here before the Paleo people. The Paleo people are the next wave of people. The teachings, when I say the teachings, I'm talking about the original instructions. And those are in the shamanic ways and the spiritual ways, the original spirituality that came in with our people. And I've been able to tie that into, my training as a Jungian depth psychology specialist through Carl Jung's work. Psychology originated with our medicine ways. When the Europeans were able to come to this continent and actually observe and live with the native people for a while, rather than just taking, the anthropology translations as best they could, they started to think about addressing illness as being from the spirit. Europeans had only addressed illness as being in the body. They had not combined spirit and body. And so when they started to look at our ways and to bring them into the alchemists were the people, of Greece and those ancient traditions that tried to stand up to the patriarchy when they brought in Christianity. They risked their lives to do that, to bring in these alchemical teachings, because they were slaughtered by the Christians in the very beginning, just like we were when they got over here. So the Woodlands people and the grandmothers of the woodlands people. We are a matriarchal society, but there is more balance than that represents. Grandmothers gathered in talking circles in the traditional ways, and they chose the chiefs, the men who would step up when things were needed. We had a peace chief and a war chief. Peace chief made life as good and as integrated as possible in everyday resources and community. And keep in mind, these civilization practices are still experimental. You can see they're not going all that well. So there wasn't really hierarchy. There was grandmothers coming into circle, developing what gifts they saw in the children, and choosing the men who would take these teachings and these ways and the very basic masculine traits of being helpful and protective, while the women are nurturing and nourishing and connecting the man to his inner power and his soul. The masculine connects the woman to the mind, logos, and we're balanced in that way. We share these teachings. And another part of that article took us to some of our sacred mounds, the Adena and Hopewell people, who actually were here in the beginning. The stories of the Cherokee people were that they were on an island that caught on fire, and they came to these mountains to be safe. And the Woodlands Adena people were already here. They're Woodlands people, they were still red race. And of course, we integrated. We mixed, just like we mixed with the colonizers, just like the Homo sapiens mixed with the Neanderthals, just like we continue to do, we integrate. Was there anything specific? I mean, those mound builders are in Serpent Mound in Ohio, and they talk about the craters coming from meteorites hitting the earth and bringing the iron. Iron only comes from meteorites, and yet it's in so many places on this earth. It's here where I live. And so I look at the valley that stretches out below this mountain, and I wonder if someday they'll find that that was a crater site, because I find it just amazing. Stone tools on my land here on the mountain, and much hematite, which they first started pulling the iron out of. So look around and reach back to those grandmothers, It's
Yeah, I
fascinating.
have several follow-up questions, but Erica has her hand up. So, Erica, did you
Oh,
have some
good.
questions?
Actually, I do. And good morning, Gail. Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.
Yeah, it's afternoon for you.
Yeah.
Anyway, what is your advice as we're building Peace Village and I study the land and I feel the sacredness, that sacred energy of the land? How can we best incorporate these teaching so that they're truly spiritually based?
Oh, thank you, Erica. Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And you're on the West Coast, right?
Yes.
So I would encourage you to find your guidance in the people of that land and connect with the spirits of that land by holding ceremonies, traditional ceremonies and traditional teachings from those people that will go back to the Anasazi. Now, you're capable, Erica, just from knowing you here, you're capable of studying those ways of the Anasazi people. Reach all the way back and take it back to the original instructions and put it into practice. If you were here, I would say, here's your native herbs. take those, release the spirit of these plants, and ask them to connect you with the ancestors and the spirits of the land who have done their work, only those who have done their work. And listen to your dreams, watch for the synchronicities, listen to the land, be very careful about working only with your ancestors and the spirits of the land who have done their work, not to any of this channeling, this recent disembodied spirits on the middle realm, because that can really make the water muddy. That can really muddy things up. So learning that discernment is really helpful, and finding the people that are connected to that land and these original instructions that came in with the Anasazi people, and putting them into practice, and then coming back and talking about your experiences, sharing them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was studying some of the photographs that Adam had sent over the other day because they were with us, and Adam took a lot of the photographs. I know that originally the beavers controlled the flow of water on the planet. And as soon as I'm going to accept accountability for that as well, began to create dams and to change and to eliminate the beavers. But one of the photographs he took, I don't know whether he saw them or not, but I saw the beavers. I see the beavers that are there, that are creating a beaver pond. So to me, that needs to be honored, and they need to be honored. We know that the land was originally occupied by the Willapa Chinook tribe. There were 3 tribes, and one was almost completely wiped out from malaria. And so those that survived merged with the Chinook tribes. And we're trying to make contact with them because I just feel really led to incorporate them into whatever we're doing there. They should be a part of it so that we're truly honoring the sacredness of the land and the space. So thank you. I'm here to learn from you today. I have been so excited. I was actually 2 hours early.
Oh, sweet. Thank you, Erica. That's beautiful.
Well,
I'm
thank you
so
for
glad
being
you had that.
thank you for
You'll be,
being here. And with that, I
yeah,
am complete.
you'll be a good steward of that land, I can tell.
Well, that's the dream.
Mhm.
That is the vision.
Adam, did you have any questions or anything you'd like to add?
I'm here as I guess I would say an anchor for the space. I don't really am just here, so that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I picked up, Gail, was that I move off of what I call flare of intuition. It's kind of like a 1, 2, 3 domino effect with me the minute my intuition heightens. And one thing that I noticed about the article that it got off into deep conversations about the circle mounds and about the different mound. And I did not see a lot about the serpent mound. And the serpent mound is the only mound that I have ever paid attention to or felt any kind of connection to. And that comes from a dream that I had in my early 30s that I had come here from M52 through the Serpent Mound. And that turned out I had that vision. I was out stargazing. It was I think I was laying on the back of the car, and I was watching. I think there was a meteor shower. There was some reason I was out there. Just remember I was stargazing, and I fell asleep on the back of the car. When I woke up with the distinct memory of that I had come from M52 through the Serpent Mound. And the Serpent Mound, of course, that was the first thing connected because of the the my first vision that I've shared with you about the cobra many years ago. But I I was just starting to get into Jungian astrology, and I went and looked, and M52 is that's part of the galactic center constellation Sag A. So I had found that out. Well, if I remember correctly, because I was studying a lot of different things back then, but and I had totally forgot about that until you just mentioned the mounds. And I remember thinking about it that night, but I love to read as I'm going to sleep. It's the connection with the stillness of the night and everything. I turn everything off. I'm literally reading by the light on my telephone. The room's dark, there's no TV, and that's my favorite time to read. And that article I had read under those circumstances that night, and I didn't all I came out of, and I think I've shared that, and I don't want to get into that because this is Indigenous Peoples Day, but I came out with it, that I was of the tribe of Danu, which we will talk about later, but not today. But I do remember that I expected to come out of all that with more about what I had learned in the reading of that. And all I came out with was, where's my serpent mound? Where's my serpent mound? And I think I need to do a deeper exploration of that. I think I'm somehow tied to that. And I remember thinking that day, that I did come to you and I did tell you, about the conversations with the elder otters and all that. But what I did not do that I knew that I was supposed to do that day is get back into the studies of the Serpent Mount. And I have yet to do that. And I would appreciate any guidance that you could bring forward of any knowledge you know of that particular mound.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's beautiful when your dreams can tie into those experiences too. I've actually sent Keith a good bit of information on the mounds, and turns out that particular mound has been associated with 3 other mounds on the planet. One is in Canada, and for some reason it's been closed. It was closed, I think, in 2016. Recently, it was an honored national site, and it's been closed to the public for some reason. You got to get curious when that happens. But there's 2 on North America, and then the third one is off the Yucatan Peninsula, actually off of the pyramid Chichen Itza, which is the only pyramid I've visited, and that was fascinating. And so they're going back, back to the original people with the mound information. And the fourth one is in Scotland. So there's your tie into the Masonic Lodge. And they all match the crater. The meteorite created the crater. And then, the information that's there says that life actually began somewhere else in the galaxy and came here on those meteors. So our legends say we came from the stars. That's one way we came from the stars. Even if you look at Wendell Berry's rendition of the Big Boom, it's a beautiful walk through humans coming from the stars, And the stone people are our elders. They've been here from the beginning. So I encourage all of you to build relationship with the stone people. And that goes with just the simplest thing of the stones we wear are connections to the stone people and honoring their teachings and their medicine. They're not jewelry adornments like the current fads and trends. Here's where the difference comes in. Reach back to the original teachings, and each of us carries a gift. Each stone carries its own teaching, its own way, its own information that it came here to share. Chief Phil calls it 4 worlds because he says we're in the 4th world. The prophecies say the first world was the teachings of the stone people. The second world was the teachings of the water people. The third world was the plants. We're in the fourth world with the animals, and we're entering the fifth world where we are responsible for becoming as human as possible, which means really going into our heart, coming from our heart and our ancestral connections to bring all of this together. Stones as ancestors, plants, water as ancestors, bringing it all together to be as human as we can be, or to collapse again and start over, like has happened so many times. So I'm glad you're having those dreams, you're watching those dreams, you're watching for those synchronicities. I'll ask Keith to share some of the links that have been beneficial for him with you if you want to dig into the words and the information, and then bring your experiences. Continue to integrate sharing experiences like that, Shonda. Thank you.
Now, are you saying, because one thing, probably because the article was concentrating on the Eastern Woodlands, it did not mention the mounds in Scotland. But
Right.
you say the Serpent Mound is tied to the mound in Scotland?
All four of those are tied. Yeah, I don't know if Keith's had a chance to look into those articles, but the information is fascinating.
Yes, it is fascinating. I didn't know about the Yucatan Peninsula one though. I just learned that just now.
What did you find out anything about the Scotland one?
No, I
'Cause
haven't.
what do you know about that one, Gail?
Similarities. Again, you know, my father and Carl Jung's grandfather recognized the similarities in the teachings, and that's when the Masonic order came about, and it came from the alchemist, and this was the origin of chemistry, which is now highly abused, you know, highly abused with the neurotoxins in our everyday products and the pipelines pulling the oil out of the earth and
Right.
really creating imbalance. So the Scottish rites fit right into the Adena Woodlands teachings. They're not as aligned with the Anasazi, just to give you the example of the woodlands and the plains, because that's what also what Vine Deloria Jr. talks about in the book he wrote on his deathbed. The world we used to live in. I think I sent you a link to that as well, tying it all back to quantum physics.
So you're referring to the 33rd degree tied to the Scottish Rite, then? That's what you're referring to? It's tied to the Eastern Woodlands?
I don't know in particular the 33rd degree that you're speaking of, but I know that a lot of the rites, I know from my experience with my father, that a lot of the Scottish rites supported our woodlands ways and rites. Again, we're talking about original instructions, going back to the original instructions.
It is either my father was also Masonic, and it's either, but I, like I said, I lost him when I was 11, or he passed over rather, and it was just childhood memories, conversations. I did more with my mother, who was third Worthigan matron in the Eastern Star. They both went through all that down in Alabama. But my father, it's either the 32nd or the 33rd degree is the highest level, and it's called the Scottish Rite. And it is, I never heard of it being tied to it. I've just always heard it referred to as the Scottish Rite, never really knowing what that meant. That's the first time I've heard reference to that being tied in any such way. The Masonic to the Eastern Woodlands, or are you saying to, what exactly are you saying the Scottish Rite is tied to? The Eastern Woodlands or the Cherokee Nation, or
The
what?
Eastern Woodlands people's ways, the original paleo rather than Anasazi, the paleo traditions and
Right.
ways.
Right.
And Carl Jung's grandfather was the grandmaster of that Masonic temple in Switzerland. So if you look at the Jungian teachings, you're going in through another, another tunnel, another entrance, another representation that is alive in our modern world. And all these teachings are alive, but if you have the foundation where they came from, then you are connected. You have a stronger grounding in those original instructions and those original teachings, and you can translate and ask your ancestors. If you don't understand, you can ask the dream time, you can ask with the plant medicine, you can ask the stone ancestors, you can ask.
Yeah, I get a lot done on the field of dreams. Um that's been my gift of where I actually do get answers, because everything else is just like, you start talking about the 32nd or 30, I think it's the 33rd degree. You talk about Masonic Lodge at all, it's, all you hear is it's tied to Satanism, it's tied to the Illuminati, it's tied to this, that, and the other. And I never found that within all of my families. My mother was the baby of 12, and all
Mine
of my
too.
aunts, all of really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had, my mother was the baby of 12. There was 12 siblings in her family, and all of the women and all of the men, every one of them were Eastern Star and Masonic Lodge. And
That's
I
beautiful.
always thought, well, that's just something they're all involved. Well, the thing is, they were backwoods country people, and how they ever got involved in that. And I don't know. There was my Aunt Greta, she married Jimmy Caruso, which was said to be of the Italian mob families. So he had money. So, we always, I remembered my Aunt Greta was the first one to show up with all the formal dresses and drag all my aunts in. She's the one that passed all the dresses down and brought all of my aunts in. And I don't remember, it seemed my father was in that up north, up in Kentucky, and he carried on down south and drug all the men in. And so I always assumed that was something that my Aunt Greta started, that was a in the city thing. But I grew up in the waiting rooms. Um, my mother attempted to get me in, what was it, the Rebecca's, the teenage version of it, the Rebecca's. And I spent many times, and I remember peeking through the doorways and watching the ceremonies, because I wasn't but you're not allowed in there. But the outdoor, there was two big double doors coming in from them, and the out was like a big waiting room. That's where the coffee pots, and that's where they all sat around and communed together. And I would always be stuck up there by myself, and I was always peeking in. I found just the spot where I could open the door, and I remember seeing the 5 chairs and watching my mother as I grew up rotate through those chairs, through Ruth, through Esther, and all the different chairs. I have my mother's Eastern Star ring with the 5 points, the 5 jewels. It's one of the very few things I ended up with uh, from uh,
Sweet.
from all of that.
And you are the youngest daughter of the youngest daughter, same as me. So we have responsibility to carry these teachings.
Wow. Erica, look at this amazing stuff that's coming out. Love the Erica, baby. You have your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, I have learned so much right now. When you just brought up the Masonic Temple, because I know many of my roots within my family. I had the great honor and pleasure, immense pleasure, of having grown up with my great grandmother and grandmother, which is where the Cherokee lineage comes from. And my grandmother married a Scotsman.
Okay, pause for a moment. When you mention them, their spirit comes in with us. Do you feel that?
Yes, I do.
feel that presence. Yeah, that's
Oh, I do.
valuable.
I
Okay.
feel every day that it's
Mhm.
always with me. And my roots from my grandfather's side were originally French, de Mandeville, who that name conjures up a lot of anger from the things that transpired when they left France and came into the Scottish territories in the UK and that area. But they were a noble family that dishonored themselves because they kept switching sides with different governments. And the only person that would come forward to bury the original Geoffrey Mandeville were the Templars. And so the ties to the Masonic Temple, I just received an invitation to become a member, which I feel drawn to accept, but because of many of the legends that Shonda just spoke of, I've been somewhat hesitant.
Respect that feeling.
But yet at the same time, I feel such a strong connection to the Cherokee roots and the blood that still flows through my veins. And that's why when I'm on the land, it doesn't matter where, I feel the presence there.
Right.
I feel the sacredness.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up sometimes singing in Cherokee when
Grab
I'm
your
awake,
phone and record that. Yeah, record that.
and I remember my previous life, and I remember the Trail of Tears. And I think sometimes that's why my heart, when I speak, the pain of all of that is still remembered. And sometimes even in joy, I'm tearful because of those memories. So thank you for sharing the Scottish connection. I never put those together.
Yeah, it's interesting, but now keep in mind, it was assimilation. It was necessary to survive, to keep these things hidden. Okay, that's why we have to really develop our discernment. When are we working with ancestors who've done their work? And when are we influenced by those questionable characters who could be on the disembodied spirit plane of the astral plane, which is a big part of the turmoil that we have on this middle realm earth right now? We came in originally working with the three realms, the lower world, the upper world, and here we are on the middle realm. Okay, on the middle realm, we only work with the elements: earth, air, fire, and water, ether, if you bring that in. But we're very, very careful to not work with those disembodied spirits on the astral plane. That's the biggest problem with the information and the distortion of our ways, recognizing the energies. And if you don't know the energy, then you ask that spirit what it needs from you. And if it needs something from you, then it has not completed its work. And you do not work with it. But what you can do, if you want to help that spirit, is you go to the ancestors that you know have done their work, that you have a relationship with, you recognize, you relate with, you have history with, you have integration with. You don't have to know their name because they know you, but you have a relationship with. If it's the water, you have a relationship with the water. If it's the stones, you have a relationship with the stones. You ask them to help those who are still doing their work. Okay, and you keep absolute boundaries, tightest boundaries you can imagine, and hold firmly from the energies on that astral plane.
Thank you. And I've learned to depend on my intuition. And when something truly resonates, then I feel it is a good starting point with the energies. If
And
it's
watch for synchronicities. Back it up with experiential synchronicities. That's the quantum physics. Bring in the quantum physics to help you.
And I'm very
Sit
familiar
with
with
it.
that. I spent much time studying quantum physics and
Good.
Carl Jung as well.
Good. Yeah, that's great. We got to
So,
team up on the shift that needs to happen.
yeah. So we want to be in alignment, but I know when I wake up in the morning, because I've been dreaming of being on that land at the Willapa River, I feel so comforted. I wake up feeling comforted by the land.
Right. Yeah.
And that really resonates with me. And intuition says that is where you belong. That is where Peace Village belongs.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And the synchronicity of it all falling into place the way it's fallen into place says, I think we're on the right path.
Yeah. Beautiful.
But it never hurts to have confirmation of that.
Yeah. And wait for integration. Just sit with it till you're absolutely sure.
Yeah, and you've spotlighted some very important information today that I needed. So thank you.
Good. You're very welcome.
And I'm complete.
Hello, Daniel. Did I see Daniel come in the room?
Hello, Daniel. Are you there?
Hello.
Hello. So today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and you are in Sweden. And yes, we've been talking pretty much about the Indigenous of Turtle Island, but it seems that the mounds of Scotland, the burial mounds, have been brought into conversation, and a lot of connections. Because one thing that I do know is that I am an old ancient soul, but this is my first visit to Turtle Island. And I find it amusing and amazing that after these walks that I have come here, and I've questioned many times why I am here, because speaking with Gail, so I was born in Ashland, Kentucky, and we looked up the three traditional nations that were in that area. And Gail has sent me pictures. How do you feel about this picture? What do you relate? And the only thing I've ever found relation to, and probably the strongest one, and Gail, I've told you the story. I should let Daniel come in here. I'm going to do that because I've got every time. This just keeps growing and connecting here. Some of the stuff that Erica came out with. But Daniel, would you like to comment, or do you have any questions for Gail?
I can actually tie him in a little bit more if you want me to tie Sweden into our conversation a little bit more.
I'd love that.
The shamanic traditions are very much alive in the Swedish and the I don't know all the words, but the original peoples of your area. I think of the reindeer, Sami and the reindeer, and I have a couple of rattles of reindeer the spirit of the reindeer comes with the skin of the reindeer, and that's what my rattles are made of. So I feel that connection, and I wonder if you have any of those traditional experiences, if you can reach back to the beginning of this wave of humans and see any evidence of old sites around you. I don't know if you're in the forest or in the city, but if you can go into the forest and see the stones piled where there may have been a traditional site. There's a beautiful Facebook group of a shamanic practice, and comes to us from Sweden. And his name is Eugene. I can give you the link if you want. But
Yeah.
when we go to those traditions, there is a lot of similarity. That's why I encourage reaching back as far as we can.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not too invested in actually Swedish heritage in this regard, but I have certainly I visited quite a few ancient Swedish sites as such, and I actually live right outside the city of Uppsala, which used to be a rather holy site in regards to having a major temple, and so there's definitely a culture to it. You can feel
Is
it.
there
And
water? Is that temple on a sacred water, an ancient water site?
I believe so. They had the what do you call it? It's not really a river, I figure, but sort of a river, small river flowing through the city. But
Is there a confluence or a well or a
I don't think the
other kind of
temple is
water?
actually. I don't think the temple is left actually. I think it was more about. It was sort of a. The way I understand it, if I remember correctly, it was more about sort of a pilgrimage
Yeah,
site.
the land that's got a tie to the water. I know in this country,
Yeah,
those sites, when they're taken over like that, so many just burn to the ground. There have
yeah,
been so many of our sacred sites that they've built. Like at one time, the largest resort on this continent was here at our sulfur springs, and it burned to a crisp. It just burned all the way down, and
yeah,
several of our sites have burned like that and returned the energy to the earth. So
yeah,
that's where it is. Yeah, if you have a chance to go to that water, go speak with the water, Daniel.
yeah. I will. I love water.
Yeah, before you leave there, definitely you want to get your roots and your relationship with the water of that land that's near you.
Yeah, I actually grew up very close to a lake, and streams. Grew up essentially with the forest as a neighbor on two angles,
Mm,
and I loved it. And so
great.
I've had proximity to both water and the forest. And when I was a child, my father was got a bit annoyed with me at times because we had a well, like an automatic electric pump for it. But of course, I was a child. I didn't realize that, and I loved, watering the plants with a water hose and such, and playing around with it. And he would have to sort of stop me because I could play around with water and
Mhm.
drain the well, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah, sweet,
it's magical.
sweet. It is magical, and it's so amazing when we actually make it conscious, make that consciousness and that attraction and that relationship more conscious and a part of our lives. It becomes even more magical. That's
Yeah,
honoring, and it's also being authentic. It's helping us be who we really are and do what we came here to do.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you, Daniel, for sharing that.
Thank you for giving me the spot.
Interesting conversation. My I've mentioned many times that I was adopted at the age of 3 by a couple old enough to be my grandparents. And my father was, so I guess my mother and father would have been my natural parents. My mother's maiden name was Todd, and my father's maiden name was Riddle, that had supposedly been shortened from O Riddle. And in school, I have blue, but according to what color I wear, they turn gray. My eyes, so my eyes are bluish gray, and my hair was in high school was pretty much fire red. So I with freckles, and I had red freckles. So I've never had my lineage run, but in my 60s, about 10 years ago now, I actually met my two of my brothers, my blood brothers. One of them, the eldest, which recently passed away last January. He his son, which is Steve Riddle. Um, he had a good friend that was the sheriff in somewhere in Ohio, but they tracked me down. They tracked me down all the way from the King's Daughters Hospital, which is where I was born in Ashland, Kentucky, because the back of King's Daughters was King's Daughters Orphanage. So I went straight to the orphanage, and I was there for 3 years. And then I was adopted at the age of 3. And they were able to track me through some kind of rewriting of laws, because the actual laws about the covering of that wasn't adopted until the 70s. And so but anyway, moral of the story, they tracked the sheriff's department of, I think it was Columbus, Ohio, tracked me. And I got a phone call. It was on a Saturday morning. And they said, well, we're looking for so and so. I said, who is this? This is your brother. And I mean, the phone hit the floor. It's like, okay. But anyway, so that happened. That's been about 10 years ago now. And I found out, so I was the baby of 4 elder brothers. We were all 2 years apart. I was born in 57, and I was the baby. So the 2 of them had already passed over. And I saw a picture of one of them, and his name was Jimmy, and he had bright orange hair, real bright red hair. And the others all seemed to look blondish. They looked like Swedes. They were blonde with blue eyes. And but the one of them had red hair. So I guess 2 of us had red hair, and the other 3 were blondish in nature. So what ended up happening is that so 2 of the brothers were gone, and only 2 had survived, but they were estranged. And he had the email address from many years ago of supposedly how to find. And that was, so this, we're talking about Michael and Philip. So Philip was down in old Mexico, and had been for years. And they had been estranged. They had different political views. One was far right wing, one was libertarian. They didn't like each other. So he gave me the email address, and I sent out an email, and about 2 months later, but it turned out that he had a he had fallen off of a water tank. He was down there on a ranch and he was up trying to paint the lid of a big water silo. And the water silo had the lid had broken. He had fell down inside. And by the time they pulled him out, he had messed up legs and back and neck. So he was in serious need of medical attention. And so this is just one of those ironic things of we find each other, and he's messed up. So my son was able to help them get out of Old Mexico. At the time, my son was a trucker. So we got them out of Sonora up to Bisbee, Arizona, across the border. And my son went over there with his flatbed and loaded all of their possessions on the back of his flatbed, including their vehicle, and put them in the back of his. He had a big studio sleeper Kenworth, and he put them in the back on his bunk and brought him back to Texas. And he stayed with me 2.5 years. He had six back surgeries, 5 on his back and 1 on his neck. And he ended up going. It turned out he was a shaman in Old Mexico, and he had gone down there from to help a friend at a ranch. He had met some friend, and they gave him a job down there. It was an American woman that owned land in Mexico, and so he had gone down there to run this ranch, and he had gotten hurt, and it was in old Mexico, and there was really not a lot of medical options down there. So he was with me for 2 years. During this time, he said before, and I tried my best to get him and Michael to talk again while they were in there. They were not going to communicate. They had so I was adopted, but the other 4 grew up on a tobacco farm in Kentucky. So they were never adopted, but they grew up together. So I guess they had this this thing. They all kind of stayed together, and I don't really know the stories because we were pretty much trying to get Philip in and out of hospitals and get him well while he was there. And the minute he could walk again, the only thing he wanted was to get out of the West Texas desert and get back to old Mexico and back to his patients. He made, if you guys are familiar with RSO, he was making cannabis oils and curing. He had cancer patients and stuff down in New Mexico. So he was anxious to get back to his path. And so he went. But one of the things he told me that before him and John had parted ways, that John had his DNA run, and that it had showed that there was a pretty much half and half. Now, this would have been my older blood brother, my oldest, and it showed half. I think it was 48% from northern Scandinavia, and the other part was from Britannia, which was the islands off the coast of Wales. And so that's what his line had. And of course, that's the only thing I know. But I've heard many, many times that what one shows up doesn't necessarily mean the others do, because the DNA is crossed. But the main thing I've always heard is that the genetics do not hold the true lineage of the indigenous, because the records just aren't there, or not just because they're just not there. They're hidden. They're
Well, they
hidden.
even say on the quantum boundary here, there's a few people that have looked into it, and they say that we don't fit. The red race, the true red race, does not fit into their system. And keep in mind that system was started by the Harvard scientists that supported Hitler. So I didn't find that out until after I had mine run for medical reasons, and I don't know that I would do it again. There is a particular gene that people on the quantum boundary can look for, and then of course, mine first came back like you're more Neanderthal than I think it was 50-some% of the population, and then they gathered more Neanderthal data, and they got back to me 3 or 4 years later and said, you're more Neanderthal the 94% of the population. And then I started paying attention. That was when I started looking into, and at the same time, Daniel Fuhr, who does a lot of ancestral work and teaches some really good classes on connecting with ancestors in a good way, connected me with a very ancient shamanic couple from those original people. And that's, when a lot of the dots started to connect and the information started to flow in. That's why I sent it out to you and Keith, so that you can open up to connecting those dots and finding out whatever you need to know. It's just what you need, just when you need it, as you experienced.
Right. So it's been a very interesting. Keith, did you have your hand up earlier? I thought I looked up. Did you have something you wanted to
Yeah, I
add?
just had something I wanted to add about what was in common with the Freemasons and the natural indigenous people was the tree of life. And the snake and the serpent mounts. The snake is in every religion. It is the lower animal instinct of you rising to the spirit, which is the body becoming the spirit. That's the alchemy of it. And that is the tree of life also, which is the Kabbalah in most religions. And it has to do with that too. But the thing in there is the 5 planets and the sun and the moon. They all work together with that tree of life, and that is the Kabbalah. And the snake is like in everything. The serpent, like I said, that's the coming up from the body to the spirit, and realizing who we are. And it's the true path of enlightenment, which is becoming the eagle or the condor or whichever raven, the bird that you are, whichever is in your path. Yeah, that's what I was just wanting to say. What was in common with the Freemasons and religions around the world is always the snake and the tree of life, or the Kabbalah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. That is so true. That is, the teaching, the details are a little different in each one, but keep reaching back. Just keep reaching back and find what resonates with your particular mix, and dig into it, put it into
I follow
action.
each religion. I go through a lot of them. I follow a lot of the Buddhist and the Hindu. I love that with the Enlightenment and Siddhartha and Buddha. That resonates well with me. It always has, because it's a lot of truth. There's nobody trying to control you, trying to tell you who you are. And of
I
course,
agree,
I'm
Keith.
Cherokee
Yeah.
also. I'm still learning a lot about that. But yeah, I have both on both sides, out of Kentucky and Tennessee.
Yeah, that's great. I also took Soto Zen vows in 2001, and I say that Zen is the talk and indigenous ceremonies are the walk.
Indeed.
A lot of similarities, yeah.
Getting in touch with the land, becoming part of nature. That's the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the snake is the closest to the earth.
That's right.
You
That's
never get any
the
closer
ground
to the
source.
earth.
That's yes.
And the
Yep.
trees balance the above and below. The lower realm and the higher realm are connected on this middle realm through the trees.
Trees in the mycelium, they have the neural network. Yeah.
Right. And the serpent and the Kundalini energy.
The Kundalini, yeah. The rising.
Spiraling.
Yeah.
Spirals.
The spiral of the chakra, part of the
going
chakra.
up.
Yeah, and your dream goes back to the Asclepian, the Greek god Asclepian, if you want to look into that one,
Oh, the cobra, the grand cobra.
The single serpent is Asclepian, and he didn't know his bounds. He got so into his healing powers that he was bringing people back from the dead, and they said, "Whoa, that's a little too far." Reel it in.
And then what I've found amazing about, I met Keith on the evening of summer solstice a year ago, last summer solstice. And one of the amazing things since we've gotten into forming the Union of Nations, and these conversations have risen. After we met you, I started telling Keith, oh, Gail and I were talking, and I would tell him about our conversations. And then I never knew this entire year that he had both his mother and father have Cherokee blood out of Tennessee and Kentucky. And
Mhm.
the of course the Tennessee is the eastern woodlands, just like, because I mean you're North Carolina, but he's part of the same movement there in Tennessee as were the borderlands of where I grew up, which was the eastern band of Cherokee and Alabama. And so
Yeah,
that's like Alabama, Tennessee, but the Kentucky thing is, so there's something about Kentucky because I was born there. Keith, were you born in Kentucky or Texas?
No, I was born in Orlando, Florida. Like I said, I'm a
Oh, never
military brat, so we went everywhere.
mind. Yeah, because I knew you were trying to get the family moved back to Kentucky, and I
Yeah, that's where my mom's side is. My dad uh came out of basically the orphanages, his side, so he doesn't know a lot about his history. A lot of my dad's side of the family were in orphan.
wow.
They were part of the orphans. There was a
yeah,
reset in the early 1800s or before that. Basically here, they call it the mud floods. And they said that they actually grew people through orphanages, and that's what populated a lot of this area with white people, was the orphanages. And that's something I'm diving into now about, after the Tartarian race and different things that went on. I'm just trying to figure all this out right now.
And where was this? You say here, you speaking of
Yeah, here in the United
Texas?
States,
Oh,
because the ancient Egypt was actually here too. Like before that,
yeah.
California used to have it was separate from, it was an island because it had this huge lake in the middle of it, and they called that the Red Sea. And the land of milk and honey was California, and it was separate from from North America. It was through a lake
Mhm.
that has been since gone, and now it's the farmland that's so fertile there. But they said that was the original Red Sea, and the original Egypt, the ancient Egypt, came from the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon was not dug or by a river; it was done from mining gold from the original Egyptians. We have the Nile that comes down the Mississippi River because they said in the Bible has 7 tributaries. Well, the Mississippi River has 7 tributaries. The Nile only has three in Africa.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
is
it's
the Mississippi
fascinating.
River is the original Nile. It is the original Nile. That's why Memphis is
Yeah.
right there, and you have a pyramid sitting there today. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
oldest river on the planet is the News right here in North Carolina. Yeah,
Wow.
that goes into that. It all fits together. You just got
It
to
all
dig
fits
deep
together.
enough.
The
Yeah.
ancient. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the red race, you were talking about the true red race is East Coast, Shonda. It's all of us on the East Coast. Goes all the way up in the Great Lakes people in Canada.
and
We're
there's
all red
and
race.
another thing too. You mentioned that the lineage leading back to the the downlines coming across the Bering Strait, that was only for the paleo. The eastern woodlands, they came down through the water. They came down through the eastern waters, and I've got the maps for that. There was two paths down. One was through the eastern waters, and that's where those 5 nations, all the Seneca nations and the eastern woodlands came from. They came from the eastern waters. They didn't
They
come
say
from
the
the
red
south.
race, they say all red race has some yellow, but obviously not all yellow has some red. So that may be true, but our legends say we came from the stars.
Oh yes, most
So keep
definitely.
reaching
Yeah.
back. Yeah. And
Yeah.
separate the Anasazi and the Paleo because their teachings are so different. If you start listening to the Hope, some of the Hopi teachings, Pueblo, the Navajo, you'll start to recognize the Anasazi as opposed to the Paleo.
Yeah. And I think that's what ended up happening with me is that because I left the eastern woodlands at 18 and I came to El Paso with a Tigua tribal member, and that was Tigua Pueblo de Sol, the House of the Sun, House of the Western Sun. And so that's I married into that And that's been what I've studied because I'm in Texas. And all the ways, and even my spiritual, what I call my spiritual father was Hope, the shaman I studied with, and my spiritual mother was Danae, the clan mother that I studied under. And both of those are, they're both of the Pueblo people. And
Mhm.
but yet,
There
you know,
is a Cherokee band in Texas. The Gadua band is Texas and Louisiana Cherokee.
yes, I've heard of those, but I I hear nothing of them here. They've got their I think they're East Texas, I believe. I'm West Texas. I'm only an hour from the New Mexico border. I'm way over on the west side of Texas. It takes 15 hours to get across the state alone. Yeah, a big state.
Wow.
Erica's had her hand up for so long. Come on in, Erica.
I keep listening and learning. Anyway, my great grandmother and that portion of my family came from Alabama, from the great hills of Alabama. And I used to hear those stories, all these wonderful stories from my great grandmother.
Wait. Say that again. Your grandmother came from Alabama?
My great grandmother, and my grandmother was born in Alabama.
What
Actually,
part? Do you know what part?
Mount Pisgah.
So you'll reach back to Nancy Ward. The beloved woman of Alabama Cherokee was Nancy Ward, and
Yes.
she was fascinating. I encourage you to connect with her, and I'm going to have to go pretty soon. Check in with
Yeah.
my day job.
Is she
And
the
I
one that
just, I
Gail
just
is? Oh, I'm
before
sorry.
she had to go, I just want to acknowledge when Keith was speaking about the snake as the symbol for the Masonic Lodge, it's also the pyramid and the all-seeing eye.
Mhm, mhm.
And the instructions given are follow the light.
Yeah. On a solstice.
Follow
Yeah.
the light.
Beautiful. That's the sweet note to end on for me. I'm going to leave you guys. I'm so grateful for this
One quick
opportunity.
question before you run off.
Okay.
Nancy Ward, is that who you said?
Yeah, her actual Saligin name was Nanahi, which is our immortal. She was named after our immortals, and she's got a fascinating
Is
history
she
of.
is she the one that wrote the book about the 16 principles of the Cherokee? Is she the one
I'm
that
not
wrote
sure
that?
about that. I'll have to look into that. I know her story is they had captured a woman and actually lit the fire to burn her at the stake. And the beloved woman can intercede. She can say, wait. And she stepped up and said, wait, I'm going to take this woman home with me. And
Well,
so she saved her life and took her into her family. And she was always doing stuff like that. She's
okay, well
fascinating.
that's definitely something we have to look in. But thank
Yeah,
you
I'd love
so
to hear
much
it.
for Gail. Any last questions
Mhm.
before
Yes,
Gail
thank you,
takes
Gail.
off?
Appreciate you so much.
Yeah, you're all very welcome and so happy to be able to share in this way.
And so ends the first episode of the educational platform for Union of Nations. And as tradition within the gathering, as we stop the recordings, everyone say thank you to the energy in the room. Thank
right.
you, Gail.
Thank you, Gail.
Oh,